Our podcast series, Welcome to the Future, starts now.
What's up, guys? It's Leo here, and we are back with episode number 10. For those of you just tuning in, this is our last and final episode of season 1. Man, wow, it's been a crazy, crazy season. We've had a great list of guests. And for those that are just tuning in again, we've had Mr. Soul, Rick Campanella, Kevin Kute, Steve Cantwell, Eden Water Technologies, Mrs. Brooke Burke, Stoller, Green Bodie. And on today's episode, we have none other than the organic cultivator himself, Mr. Brandon Rust. And you're in for a treat within this episode. I promise you're in for a treat. Also sitting in with us, we have our sales guru here in-house at Fohse. He's also an expert cultivator. His name is Mr. Evan Marinangeli. I probably butchered that name wrong. We'll probably get into that this episode. And then last but certainly not least, you see this guy sitting in often. He is our VP of Cultivation and also our VP of Public Relations. He goes by the name of Mr. Mike Howard. Anything you want to know about cultivation once you purchase a Fohse fixture, this is going to be your guy. And on today's episode, we're going to get into some goodness. So, Brandon, starting with you, tell me more about yourself. Let's get into the origin of Brandon Rust. Tell me more.
Sure. So I was introduced to cannabis probably in around 8th grade or so. And, I was in foster care when I was younger, and we moved around a lot. And I went through a lot of things when I was really young, and as a result of that, I was on pharmaceuticals and medication and stuff like that, and cannabis changed that, right? Because it made me have a different type of outlook, and so it was kind of a mental awakening, and it made me be able to process my thoughts a little bit better and my feelings a little bit better, and so it really helped. It helped me not have to use those medicines, and it made me realize that I didn't need those medicines to begin with. It was other people's ideas of what I should be, is why they were, putting me on these things to begin with. And so it was just a kind of a spiritual and mental awakening when I started using it, and it just had a really profound effect on me. And so that is one of the ways that it has, really helped me. And, I just kind of pursued a career in it, even though it was illegal, because I loved it so much, and I just felt like it had such tremendous benefit, and it was profitable as well.
Right, of course. Of course, profitability always helps, right? So how did you transition from obviously being a partaker in cannabis at an early age, recognizing its influence and its effect over the traditional medications that they were giving you as a youngster, right? How did you transition from that into the focus on soil and all of that? Give me a little bit of that.
Oh, well, I was introduced to some OGs, and they had been cultivating indoors for, since the really early 90s, some of them the late 80s. And I was introduced to them, and I knew what they were doing, and I put in a lot of work because I wanted to work with them. I wanted to get into the business. I wanted to see what they were doing. I wanted to get into their grow houses. I wanted to fucking smoke their weed. I wanted to be part of that, thing, because that's something I had been looking for, because I had always been looking for the best plug, because when I was younger, I was fucking slanging weed because I couldn't financially really support the habit that I had. I was smoking weed every day. So it's like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to buy more than I can smoke. I'm going to fucking sell half of this. I'm going to make my money back, and I can keep doing it at least, right? So that's how it kind of started, right? And then, as you get a plug and you got a steady plug when you're young, then people are like, hey, where'd you get that? And then it turns into a little thing, and next thing you're slanging weed.
Right.
So, that's kind of how it started. It was just the want to be able to support my own habit and wanting to be able to find better weed and, better connections. And I knew that these guys were cultivating, and they had been for a really long time. And so, I worked with them, and I was doing things at first, just like washing their dogs and mowing their yards and just doing bullshit, washing Hydroton rock in their backyards and shit like that, like just washing buckets, not never seeing a system, never seeing what's going on. I did that for months and months before they ever brought me on board and like took me to the grow house and stuff. And when they did, it was back then everything was super clandestine. It was one of those situations, blindfolded, thrown in the back of the truck, driven to the grow house. And it was crazy because I got in there and I got to see like my first like legit grow, and it was just plants. They were 7 feet tall. Whole room was packed.
Did you hear the little?
It was.
When you
It was
open the
like it
door?
was just like that. That bright light hits you, and it's just like you're bathed in the glory of the jungle that's inside of a bedroom where you absolutely know it shouldn't be, like.
But you finally feel at home, like this is where I belong.
Like,
this is finally where I belong.
I made it. That's what's going through your head. I'm there, finally there. As a kid, it's like it's exhilarating.
Yeah.
Because it's the thrill of like knowing that it's not that it's bad, but that it's still illegal, and it's like it has that. It still had that kind of ambiance to it, or it still had that like thing about it where it was kind of like mythical.
Right.
It was like, dude, the grow,
The thrill factor.
It was the thing that I had been reading about in High Times magazine since I was a teenager and stuff. So being able to see that and then being able to work on that, and I worked with those guys for about 2 years, and then after they showed me the ins and outs. We were all running the ebb and flow, the 2-gallon buckets that were filled with hydroton rock, and we were growing the Afghani Bull Rider, Purple Kush, and we had a bunch of different places. We had a couple apartments, a couple houses, and we'd go service everything every day. And I did that with those guys for about 2 years, and then I got my own partners, and I've been doing it ever since. In 2006, I did go to prison for cultivation, sales, and theft of electricity.
Theft of electricity.
Well, I had other charges. Those what I had to plead to. They're like, they'll tap on every other thing that they can think of.
Right.
Like misdemeanors, this and this and that. And it's like, okay, just plead to this, and you're gonna do a 32-month prison term with halftime because it's nonviolent. It's your first offense, and. I did that. I got out in 2008, went and got some stupid job while I was on parole. Because at that time, you could get off parole in like 13 months.
Okay.
And it was totally possible to do. You just, have to have a job and have an apartment and stuff. So I did all that stuff. I was working at like a Target and a Pizza Hut, and I absolutely hated it. And I was like, this is just terrible. And as soon as
it's because it is.
This is not the way that I want to live right
terrible.
now. This is not it.
No, and it's not something that I can like do for long term, and so it was just a thing just to satisfy the courts. But at the same time, a couple months in, started feeling comfortable, started feeling things out. It was going pretty well, so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna hit up my boys and get plugged in and get some weed going and start saving up and get another grow going. So that's how it's always been. Like if something has happened where I've gotten knocked down, it's like, okay, I get knocked down, do what I need to do, but I'm going to come back and I'm going to come back stronger, and I just been growing, since. And I was out in California doing this thing forever, down in San Diego, and back in 2015, I did another prison term for manufacturing.
Okay.
Because that was when like the shatter craze was going on, and I had actually learned how to make butane hash oil back in like 2003. And so I knew all about it. I knew how to do it, and I was like, oh shit, like I'm gonna hop on this, because there was all these new companies, and it was weird. It was a weird transition, especially in San Diego, because you had a bunch of like semi-legal dispensaries that weren't really legal. They were kind of still black market, but it was under Prop 215 pre-64, and it was this weird transition period where like prices of stuff started to drop because a lot more people started to get involved. But then you saw like black market brands like that were in dispensaries at the time, and so it was just like a huge fucking like cash grab. Everybody was doing everything. Everybody
Yeah.
was doing the most, and I was like, fuck it, I better fucking hop on this and start making some hash. And I just started making a bunch of, we were doing like, it was still early days. We were doing all open blasting and then throwing it in the oven, vacuuming it. And so this was my pre-organic.
Yeah.
And I think this happened in, no, I was still growing organic when I think this happened. I had just switched over, but I was still doing, there wasn't rosin and stuff like
Right.
that. There wasn't really like a huge.
Best was blasting with butane.
That's
Yeah.
kind of like where it was at. And so I was doing that, and some weird shit happened with the neighbors, something completely unrelated, and the sheriffs ended up at my house. And like, long story short, I did another prison term for that. And that was when that happened. I went on the run, and I was like, I did all my, I did all out of here. Well, no, look at. So I did all my main court appearances, and I knowing full well that at the end of this thing that I was gonna skip out on my last court date. Just because my thinking is, look, I worked way too hard at what I do. Like, I bust ass to fucking grow weed, and I, hustle my ass off. And it's like, you guys are gonna have to fucking come find me. And so I played it all out just so I have more time out and I can get things together, get money together, that kind of stuff. For when I do know that I get locked up, I still have a support and I have a backup, And so I stretch that whole thing out, and then I dip out and I get another 14 months. And that's actually when I started the Bokashi Earthworks company, is when I kind of like really started running with it. Mm-hmm. Because it was actually a friend of mine, an older woman. She's retired, and she has like these hobby businesses that she starts. And I was already using Bokashi in my regiment. And what ended up happening was she had like started, she's like, oh, doing another hobby business like she does. And I was like, hey, this is a cool idea. I'm going to start rolling this stuff up, and I'm going to start doing this. And so I, really started running with it and started putting stuff together, had stuff in the shops down in San Diego at like San Diego Hydroponics. And I was still on the run at this time, though, and so I had another grow. I was fucking trapping, doing my thing, fucking slanging weed, doing whatever, and I had put money aside. I did eventually get caught up, and when I was locked up that time, I was like, I got to figure this out. I was like, because California ain't fucking working out for me. I've been doing this for fucking years, and it's been ups and downs the whole time, which is cool, because I mean, it's fine. I loved it, and the reason why I loved it is because it gave me freedom, right? I think the biggest thing about cannabis, and the thing that I think legacy cultivators really feel the most, is that being able to be self-sufficient with something that you've created and made yourself, that gives you independence, financial independence. You don't have to pay taxes and get raped on like, how much money you have to give the government, and it gives you the feeling of, being self-sufficient. And self-sufficiency is the base of like true independence. And so with an unregulated market, and with the ability to support yourself and your family, it came that sense of like real independence, which is the base of the American dream, right? It was really like the almost kind of the last business in America that is like the true American dream, where it's like you're not getting taxed to death, where you can survive,
it's the free
and
for
like
all.
and have open free markets. And now those open free markets have become something completely different, where the consumer isn't even really allowed to touch and feel the product, and in certain situations, depending on where you are. And so, that was the thing for me. I didn't want to quit this ever, because I loved this, and I loved what it's given me, even though it's given me bad times too. But I love this, and so I had to figure out while I was in there, how the hell am I going to make this thing work to make sure that I can continue to do this and support myself and help educate people, and share the knowledge that I've acquired over the years and the experience that I've had with this plant. And not just from, the soil science side and the cultivation side, but from actual the side of healing side, because we all go through those traumas and stuff. Like I said, like shit that happens in early childhood, or things that may happen. Someone might lose their parents and stuff like that. And like being able to have some type of medicine for the head, it helps, man. And it helps with that trauma, and you don't have to be on, you know, these like heavy psychedelics that turn people into basically zombies like it did me. You know, made it so I couldn't feel, and made me feel sluggish and slow, and it didn't make me feel like the person that I was potentially meant to be.
Right.
You know, and I know cannabis isn't for everybody, but I feel like it's good medicine for a lot of us. And so I wanted to be able to share that with people, and you know, and I didn't want to stop because I love growing the plant. I love what it does. I love smelling it and touching it and using it as medicine. And so I formulated a plan, and I wrote everything down, and I'm one of those guys who's super curious and wants to know a lot about everything, you know. And when I was younger, I spent a lot of time in like the library reading about ancient history and like the mind and like all these different aspects. And I just started to realize, you know, hey, I am responsible for creating my own reality. Like I need to set all the things that I already know in motion. And so I started writing things out. I started making comprehensive plans, and I went and wrote things out really mechanistically. This is what I want. These are my goals. This is how I'm going to get it. And you have to set a plan in motion, and then you have to take the steps and put in the work, right? Because that's the biggest thing. When you vision yourself where you want to be and the goals that you have, that's one step, right? But you have to take that and put it into reality. And just by writing it out, that's furthering that step, right? And so, and then look at it. Okay, now you have this on paper, and now we can go. It's like you have everything written down for this, so you can make your show run smoothly.
Right.
It's like you do the same thing for all aspects and say, how do I incorporate Bokashi Earthworks and education and cannabis and branding and marketing, and how do I make this a whole comprehensive business? You know, how do I make this to, you know, so I can help people and also support myself and my family and help support the people that I work with. You know, the people like Organic Glaze and Red Dirt Raised and Carter Creek Cannabis and Native Provisions, and the people that I work with regularly to help create high quality, consistent organic product, and, you know, keep them brand visible, right? Keep their names in the public eye, and knowing, hey, these people are always going to be producing a high quality product because they're following a certain standard operating procedure that's been put in place by Bokashi Earthworks, my company, or Earthworks Agriculture, my consulting LLC. And make, you know, because it's huge when we're talking about cannabis as a business. Like, all those things matter, having good quality and being passionate and having a mission. But you also have to have brand visibility in this day and age. As a small business, it doesn't matter if you're in cannabis or not. What you need to have is you need to have a market. You need to know who your market is, and you need to have a way to reach those people. And sometimes, you know, there's what's called, you know, how much customer acquisition, you know, and you can get customer acquisition and not have to pay for it. And you do that by being part of that community and engaging with that community and helping with the educational concepts, and by featuring like the new sciences that are coming out and saying, hey, you can do this and this works for this type of setup, and being able to introduce the new concepts that are coming online as we progress further and further into like the science of lighting, the science of soil, the science of the different microbiology that you can put into the soil systems, the science of green waste recycling or carbon positive farming. Like, all of these things are becoming more and more prevalent, and especially when it comes to scaling these systems and becoming cost effective. Because things like nutrient use efficiency is a huge thing that we have to look at. And if you're using chemicals that only have 15% nutrient use efficiency, it's very wasteful. Or if you're using medias that can't be recycled, that you have to constantly pay, that's not a sustainable, scalable model. It's when you're able to implement these systems where you're able to do recycling of the media and not having to throw things out, doing things like composting, using earthworms to break down the material instead of having to put it in a waste bin and have a collection company spend money for gas and fuel. Like a lot of the things that are implemented in a lot of these types of legislative models are just not comprehensive to or conducive for for reducing environmental impacts. And so when I'm talking about building out these models that are based off of data analytics and green waste recycling and stuff, and cost effective mineral inputs, that's what we have to look at. We have to look at and that's some things that we're dealing with too, is the legislative bodies. I mean, we were over at the facility yesterday, and they were talking about how they couldn't do their own plant ferments and stuff because they couldn't make their own inputs, essentially, is what the state was telling them.
He couldn't even put his green leaf back in his beds anymore.
And that's really interesting because that material doesn't contain any psychotropic substances. It's not going to get anybody high, and you're basically just creating more waste, and that could go back into that system. That's going to break down, release carbon,
capture
release
more carbon,
mineral nutrients, and it's going to feed the worms that are in there, and it's going to help sustain the longevity and the health of that system. And it's a component that they don't want in there. And they don't not want it in there because they don't want it in there. They don't want it in there because they don't understand the system, because they're not educated on why it's important. And that's the real issue. And that's why it's important for people to come on these types of things and talks about these issues. Like, some of the legislation in a lot of states aren't conducive to being green in that movement that people really want to push forward on. Like, people want sustainability. People want to have regenerative agriculture practices. And I mean, some people will ridicule and be like, oh, well, it's indoor, how regenerative is that? And it's like, well, we can still reduce our carbon footprint and the impact that we're having. And that is important too, because just because some people don't want something to exist doesn't mean it's going to stop existing. And it's like, the best thing that we can do is help change the system and help it be more cost effective, be more energy efficient, be less impactful.
Reduce the total impact of the negative impact from farming.
Earlier, you mentioned impacting the science aspect of what you do, and I wanted to touch base on your carbon-based fertilizer. But before we do, I didn't make sure, I didn't do a proper lead-in for you or the business that you run and the organization that you have with Bokashi Earthworks. So let's start there. Would you mind giving them a little bit of the backstory and kind of like where the name stemmed from, and then connect that into the benefit of your product and what growers gain by utilizing that?
Yeah, so Bokashi is a Japanese word. It's a type of anaerobic fermentation that uses a type of flocculative anaerobes to kind of ferment compost as opposed to have it aerated. And it's also a substrate that's used. It's inoculated with a certain consortium of microorganisms, and it helps to break down food waste, and it can turn food waste into basically bio-fertilizers. And so when I first started my company, that's what I was strictly manufacturing. I was just manufacturing a EM Bokashi, made from a wheat bran and other mineral amendments and stuff like that. And it's progressed from there. So now I actually have the Microbe Plus, which is a consortium of different species of bacillus bacteria. It has a Pseudomonas, which is a purple non-sulfur bacteria, and it has a fermentive yeast, and they work synergistically to cycle nutrients, outcompete pathogens. One of the main benefits that we get from that specific consortium is the ability to solubilize and release phosphorus from inorganic sources, and making available sources to the plant. And also we've also seen a really high increase in manganese. But with it, the way that it works is this consortium of microorganisms, they release these secondary metabolites, these compounds that are like enzymes or organic acids, and so they can break down organic matter, and they can cycle the nutrients that are in the soil, making some things that may not be available or in available form in the soil, and they make them into a biological available form into for the plant uptake. And then they also and then some of these too, they also have phytohormones, which will actually stimulate certain growth responses in the plant. And some of them will have metabolites that will actually increase things like acquired immune resistance and systemic acquired resistance, which is a gene response.
So not skipping past this, I noticed that your carbon-based fertilizer was developed by Dr. George, and I want to make sure I get his last name right, Kaltezas.
Yeah, he's a Greek man, very, very, very smart gentleman.
Of NASA Agricultural Technologies, right?
Yes. So
Okay.
he was the engineering director on the Apollo space project. So he
Nice.
worked for NASA. This was a long time ago. He's an elderly gentleman now, and I was put in contact with him after trying some of his fertilizer that he had developed, and I saw immediate results, and it was pretty incredible what I was seeing. So I wanted to talk to him about what exactly was happening, because I do the agronomy for living soils. That's like my forte. I look at soil analytics, and I go in and I adjust those levels. And so when I add something into a system and I see a really positive result on the system overall, I want to know, what's going on. And so he invited me out to Chicago to his office at NASA Agricultural Technologies, and we just started talking, and we kind of built a good business relationship. And so one of the products that I have is the Humate fertilizer, which is the Smart Carbon. Mm-hmm. And it acts as both a biostimulant, because it has a water-soluble form of carbon that helps stimulate the biology, but it also has all the macro and micronutrients associated, because it's derived from the lignite source. So all the things like iron and copper and zinc, those are in there, magnesium, and then you also have your macronutrients, NPK. And so it really helps keep those soil systems sufficient throughout the whole entire run, and it really increases the production value.
Got it. Interesting here. Perfect. So, we mentioned in Green Bodie, we talked about, holistic, and obviously he had the Buddhist approach with how he goes about his methodology, right? How have you been able to incorporate holistic methodologies in your soil process, or referring to it as living energy? How have you been able to maintain the living energy, I should say?
So when I'm not just looking at soil system. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about looking at things holistically, because we need to be looking at environmental parameters. We need to be looking at lighting parameters. We need to be looking at how much time you're going to be vegging, what the maintenance looks like, because it's a whole entire program. And I'm going to give you a really good example. The uptake of calcium is highly dependent on the plant's ability to transpire. So if your vapor pressure deficit or your environmental conditions are not right, you're going to have lower uptake of calcium. Okay, that is across the board. That's how it is. Okay, so that being said, you could have all the right sufficiencies in your soil or in your nutrient mix if you are in a hydro system, but if your environmental parameters aren't right, you're not going to be meeting those target levels if you were to take something like a tissue test or a saturated paste test. Mm-hmm. You would see deficiencies in the tissue itself because of not because of a nutrient issue, but because of an environmental issue that's directly correlated to how those things are taken up.
Okay, got it.
And so there's relationships that exist like that throughout the whole process, and it's not just calcium and stuff like that.
You see a lot of guys associate LEDs and CalMag usage, and sometimes I wonder if it's more a product of not figuring out the VPD correctly when you change over to LEDs.
Well, that's huge because you have to run with LEDs. You have to run higher temperatures and higher humidities, because the thing is, you're not getting that heat that the HPS lights give off, and the plant reads that as something different, right? And during an HPS, so they have that thermal energy, that heat. That acts as a catalyst to help with those processes that are happening. Right. When you're using these LED lights, you're having one, you have a wider frequency,
Yep.
right,
Yep.
of light, and it's usually more intense. And so what people need to realize is that you're going to meet your DLI, your daily lighting intervals, faster, right? So you don't always need to be pumping these things at fucking max power the whole time. Like you can do ramp ups, do, you know, maintain a certain PPFD, and then do a ramp down for your lights off. And that's also to help mitigate any types of spike in your environment, because the way that temperature and humidity are correlated, when you have 70, or let's say you have 75 RH, that when the room is rapidly cooled, that water will condense, and so your humidity will spike, right? And you want to mitigate those spikes during those times, because those are the types of environments that pathogens can thrive in, right? Those nice cool environments with real high humidity, you know.
So talk about the. Sorry about here. This is some good. What is this that we're actually smoking here?
Mike, what is it?
Can we do an honorable shout out here?
Oh yeah, that's Bodie's GMO and LSOG.
Oh, yeah, I gotta see some of that.
So Green Bodie still leaving around some goodies here, John.
Oh, yeah, I
the
wanna see
people
that
here
too.
at Fohse,
Yes.
we appreciate you. You're still leaving some good gems around. This is the I forgot the name of this one.
Is that the ancient OG times GMO?
I think.
It's GMO times. It says LSOG. I'm not sure if that's actually.
LSO.
I think it's like one of the skunk or.
Oh, okay.
Whatever it is,
I don't think
it's
I've had that
fire,
one.
John. Thank you. We appreciate it
LSOG,
today.
it's
Can you Leo? Can you sorry?
Humate fertilizer. I know I was supposed to touch on the humate fertilizer that
for sure.
Dr.
That's
George.
what that was. Yeah.
So yeah, the humate fertilizer is
Hold on,
really.
before you fin- I'm sorry, Mike. What were we gonna say? No, you're good.
Like how we were talking earlier when you were saying like if you increase light levels, then you can do kind of those testings to see where you're going deficient and stuff like that. Can you just talk on a little bit on how you would go about like seeing, you know, kind of where that genetic potential is and what you do in the soil system to make
Exactly.
sure you're kind of hitting all the targets?
Yep.
yeah. So, and we've touched on this a lot over the last couple of days, and
I'm sure.
talking about how the way in which you interpret your data right now in the industry, when I look around, and even with guys running salts, because of how those programs works, there's no way to actually interpret what the plant is using and what's readily available after that cycle. And you're the only one in the industry that's knowledgeably talking about how that's going to be done, how those samples get done, and how you're amending the soils and getting it done throughout the cycle. And so when we're looking at lighting and looking at doing comparative analysis in this industry on a lot of different products, not just lights, but what ACs, I mean, on various products that claim to make a difference, your systems are actually able to show what the difference is, and if the difference is positive or negative, and what the net gain is for what money spent in is as well.
It can definitely add to the data, and there are a couple other people that are doing what I do. I have a lot of experience hands-on with the data and with and from a consulting standpoint. So I'm looking at other people's data as well that are doing the same program.
What are some of the pieces of data, or like what are some key pieces that you collect?
I'll go over the whole like procedure and how that works, right?
For sure.
So essentially what you do is you take soil samples. So let's say you have a huge bed. It's a 4x bed. Maybe it's got 20 yards of soil. You'll take a couple of random samples from each bed. You homogenize that soil, and that goes off to Logan Labs. What happens is whoever has that piece of data, they email that to me, and then I do the analytics. And so let's say I have a new customer, and I know that they're doing a bunch of soil tests. They have a lot of beds, and they're going to need a wholesale as well on all the mineral inputs. Now, it's super cost effective because you can buy things like magnesium sulfate for $19 for a 50-pound bag, gypsum something like $11 for a 50-pound bag. You can buy iron sulfate for $35 for a 50-pound bag. You can buy something like you can buy basically everything extremely cheap. You can buy pallets of it, and you could spend a couple $1,000s and literally have all the mineral amendments that you would need for a whole entire year. Maybe you spend like $3,000 or $4,000 on mineral inputs, amino acids, some soybean meal, some alfalfa, stuff like that. It's super, super inexpensive, and you have it there, right? And then what I do is they send me that data from that test, and there's a couple of different tests. One is a soil test, and that gives you an overall view of what's in the soil. And then there's what's called a saturated paste test. And the saturated paste test shows how these things fall into solution. Like, it shows how your soil falls into solution and what is in a biologically available or a metabolically available form. So calcium in what form and how much as a ppm. And so I have the formulation of how much calcium, how much sulfur, how much phosphorus, how much potassium, how much magnesium, and all the micronutrient levels, what those should look like as that thing falls into solution. And so as long as we're meeting those target levels or are really close to those target levels, then we're going to always have the same result over and over and over again, because you're meeting that target consistently all the time. Now, this is the interesting thing though. So we have this base target. I know what the target are. There's also a tissue test before I go too far. Sorry. There's the soil saturated paste, and then there's the tissue. The tissue analysis will actually show what from solution is being stored as a percentage in the tissue as a percentage, or as a ppm if it's a micronutrient. And then you can take it one step further, and you can do what's called a SAP analysis. And a SAP analysis, it's actually two different tests, and it tests the lower portions of the plant, fully photosynthetic bottom parts of the plant, and then fully photosynthetic tops of the plant. And what it does is it gives you a comparative analysis of what's being moved around. For any of the mobile nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, magnesium, there's others. If they have the ability to be moved around, the plant will actually show it in the paste before it ever shows the deficiency symptoms. So you could see if it's only 10% deficient, it's not going to have any real effect on the plant at that point. But if you can physically see that it's 10% deficient, or that it's starting to pull from the lowers to compensate, even though you're meeting your target levels, then you can adjust that target level for that plant in that area. So if it's like your magnesium levels are low, and it's translocating, it's pulling your magnesium or your nitrogen from the bottom, then okay, I need to add more nitrogen to my target level for this specific variety. So if you're a farm and you're going to have this variety for X amount of years, it's a staple, you can dial in a specific program that's based off of agronomic data and make a new target based off of just the general target that we have.
Cultivar.
Yeah. And so it takes a little bit of testing, but it's well worth it to do a whole line run of testing to build your SOP for that specific variety.
Right.
That way, when you go and say, hey, and you give me your soil data and say, we actually have a computer program that we're bringing online. I don't think I've told you about this yet, but I won't, all you'll have to do is put in your numbers from your Logan Labs test in the columns, and it's going to give an automatic readout of everything that you need to add in the right amount.
Nice.
So it'll say you need 2 cups of calcium per yard of soil and 1 cup of magnesium sulfate per yard of soil, or XYZ, and it'll give you the options. Like, do you want, bone meal, or do you want calcium phosphorus as your, and so it'll have some options, and it'll be like kind of just automated into the website. So it'll cost less for people to access that, and so people can go in there, put in their test, and then they can go say, okay, this is what I need. They can go order either wholesale or in smaller size for home growers. It's part of the stuff that we're working on building into our website,
right,
as we scale this thing.
Nice.
And so, but right now, that's what I'm doing. I'm doing the data analytics, and I'm making sure that these soil systems are sufficient, and that those nutrients are also balanced where they should be.
So how many of your, these larger ag customers are doing strain-specific analytics that you just spoke of?
I'm the only one that's done it.
Okay.
Because typically the target level works so well and everybody's already happy with it that it's one of those things, like, it's it's only
So you're
really worth it.
specialized.
It's only really worth it if like you have something that you really want to run for a long time. It's something that's going to kind of be a staple, and maybe it has some weird thing where it doesn't do as good as the other plants in the room. And like, hey, I want to run this and we want to continue to run this, but we need to figure out exactly what the nutrient issues are with this plant because we can't keep running. And that's
We saw that in the way yesterday, actually.
Yeah.
In that room, mixed beds. We
Yeah.
see cultivars, most of them pretty slamming down in a room, and then one that just
And it's one of the reasons I really, encourage people not to run too many varieties in a room and try to find something that has marketability, that has a good sell through. And if it has a good sell through, brand it out and market it and grow that variety until, something better comes along or until the market decides that it doesn't want it anymore. That's
and that goes back to how important the marketing is, and how we even talked to them we talked to a cannabis company the other day, and you see somebody just having flower in the market and how important it is to not just have flower, but have an edible, have a concentrate, and have all these different products so you can stay in the market. When your flower's not in the market, you still have something as presence. And so they're not looking. You can still sell your brand and not go to sell. Somebody doesn't have to buy outside a brand.
This is true.
And that's kind of what I also bring to the table, because I have so much experience in the industry and in the community. I'm not just bringing the consultations, but I have the soil, right? I do soil manufacturing. I have the humate fertilizer. I have the microbes. I have things for integrated pest management, SOPs. So the whole thing is built out. So if somebody wanted to have a complete system that's kind of ready to go, it's already there. Plus I can give advice on like, hey, this is how you brand things, this is how you market things, these are the people that you need to utilize to get proper photography. And like it's what I've seen, the biggest thing that I've had to learn is you can grow great weed, but you need to also be great at business. Like you need to be able to create brand awareness. You need to be able to put together really good teams of people that have individual skills that are going to be utilized and help grow that business. Like it takes teamwork, and it takes a collective effort of all the people that I'm working with, right, to help build each other up. And so having that is really, really important as well. And so making sure that people understand that, like, when you try to enter into this, and the people that like I work with, they have to understand, like, you have to not just grow good weed, but you have to know how to run a business. Like, and that's the biggest thing. I think that's been the hardest thing for a lot of legacy guys, is because like my older homeboys, dude, they've been doing it for so long the way they have. It's like, it can be really overwhelming to try to come into a legal space with like compliancy and this and finance and and then I gotta package it, and then how do I market this, and how do I stay relevant, because these are all questions that a brand should be asking, because if you're not, if you don't have your finger on the pulse on what's hot and what's visible, then it can be hard, and it's here's the thing. There's so many new customers that come online for cannabis, and the first thing they see is they hear their, rappers talking about this and this and this. And so that's like where a lot of it, I think comes from, like who has the best marketing, who has the best, like, who has the biggest voice. Right. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at what's hot, and that's what's selling through, then grow that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. I mean, because clearly the demand is there. I mean, and
or create your own hype, like
or
make your own market. Because you can do that too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of how the demand starts. It's like consumers don't know what to demand until they've consumed something before, and they either demand more of it or they wait until you offer something different, and you hope that it's better or they like it more than what you've had previously. It's always that gamble.
Well, I mean, it's like what we've done in Oklahoma. We've created brand visibility, and we have amazing genetics, and we have some stuff from Bee Leaf. He did some collabs with In-House, and we grow some of that stuff. I think that Carter Creek is working with Node Labs, and they're gonna have some compound stuff, and I think some exotic mic stuff.
Carter Creek is, in all my travels, is hands down one of they produce some of the best flower sold in dispensaries. and part of it's probably the process and probably how Oklahoma
It's
you're
the
able to get
handling
it,
too,
the
yeah.
handling. I mean, it's the whole.
It's because we have the vertically integrated business model there, and so being able to know exactly where you need, how to store your things properly, and making sure that things don't get super dry or and it's not only that, but it's the drive from the whole team of wanting to be the best, right? They want to do their best, and it's an admirable quality because they're all really passionate about what they do, and it shows in the work. It shows in the way that it's handled when it's being trimmed, and it shows how it's being presented, in front of the patient, so.
And the regulation there allows them to be able to process the stuff in a way that they're able to present it the way they do.
Yeah,
that's
different. And that's one of the things that we've been working on is preserving those business models. And so I've been a huge spokesperson for 818 and 819, which we're going to be collecting signatures here. I think actually it just started. And that's going to be able to protect people's rights and protect the small businesses, protect the over licensing fees, over taxation, and it's going to write into the state's constitution, as opposed to just being, a piece of statute legislation. And that'll be really beneficial to the state too, because it allows the cannabis companies to be able to operate just like a regular business, that has regular business expenses that they can write off, and protects women from, child protective services if their child has a medical condition and needs cannabis for a medical condition, protects, the constitutional amendment rights for the citizens that use cannabis and cultivate at home. It protects the home grower and their ability to, it allows home grow, and so it's.
For those that want to know, sorry to interrupt really quick, I don't want to forget this. For those that want to know more and to support in advocacy by signing petitions and participating in sponsorships as it relates to 818 and 819, you can visit orcaok.com. Again, that's orcaok.com. Again, if you want to get involved with advocacy, sign any petitions, or participate in any sponsorships regarding these efforts as it relates to Oklahoma bills 818 and 819, definitely get involved. Definitely keep abreast of what Brandon is doing. His efforts are definitely appreciated. But again, that website is orcaok.com, and it will be below in the description. So stay tuned to more information. But as we get into that, close in on that, what's the difference between the California business model versus Oklahoma that you would say?
Geez. I mean, I think everybody already knows the answer to that.
Yeah.
California is just a shit show when it comes to the regulatory mandates and the overtaxation. I mean, they're making some progress with some stuff, like where they're trying to get rid of some taxes and stuff, but
they're having to roll things back, though. They're having to go from like certain regulatory and like bring it back so it makes sense.
I'll tell you what a huge difference. This is the biggest difference, and this is the difference that I want all of the state representatives and the U.S. senators and the governors and the Congress people, I want them to hear me when I say this. The difference is that when you over-regulate a market, what ends up happening is you cause harm to the economic impact that new industry has to bring to your state. And the way that works is like this. It is not just people who are buying licenses or cultivating or processing. It's all of the ancillary businesses that are associated. The people who are doing real estate, the electricians, the HVAC guys, the grow stores, the people that they're hiring. So when you have low taxation and you have low entry, it causes economic stimulation, right? And you see this in Oklahoma. Oklahoma has absolutely boomed since cannabis has become accepted, and since medical implementation of that, right? And you see businesses flourishing, and you see the real estate going up. Like, it's a huge economic impact to that state. And so that's one of the things that need to be looked at. And when you start over-regulating, overtaxing, it's usually under the guise of, oh, we're going to protect you. We're going to protect you. It always is. All these regulations are always under the guise of, we're here to help. And it's not. And right now, it's really about, like, right now they want to do a lot more regulations because they've had an influx of, illegal, like, large-scale cultivation sites, like they see out in, like, in the deserts out in California and stuff. It's like you see the same things popping up, in
They're all over the
Oklahoma.
place.
I mean,
It's
but
the
they're
same
everywhere,
thing.
and it's not just, and it's just an excuse that they use. And it's like, well, the whole problem and the whole reason why those still exist is because you don't have sensible legislation in places all over the country. So you guys are inherently creating the problem and then saying that, oh, this is an issue, this is how we're going to address it. And the way to address it is to just make sure you have sensible legislation across the board. And it's going to create a positive economic impact if the legislation is written well and the people can get invested in it. And look, not everybody is going to succeed in this. Yeah, there are people that are going to do fucking great. There are going to be people that have no experience that are going to come in and kill it too, and people might hate on them. But there's going to be old school dudes that come in and can kill it under these conditions. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's going to be able to stay in business. And the thing is, it's because not everybody is good at business and cultivation, right? And so a free market will eventually even itself out, and the true price of what quality and mid-grade and low-grade products go for will be really established at that point. Right. But the problem is, you have to have a good comprehensive business strategy. Right? It's not just, and it's top to bottom, and that's hard because that takes a huge team. And the larger you go, the more like soulless some of these places can feel, because it's like, the people don't have a collected vested interest in it. It's just work to them, and so that's why I love working in Oklahoma, because there's so many good small businesses, mom and pop, and they're owner operator. They're the people in there putting in the work, and so they have a vested interest in it. If it doesn't work for them, they don't have
that's
their trust accounts to fall back on.
Yeah, they're in on it.
What I
It's
mean?
full
Like,
in.
And so when you have that type of dynamic, and another big problem about some of not having owner operators is if like from a consulting standpoint, if something needs to get done and you're like, hey, this is what you need to implement and this is the way that it needs to be done, it has to go through a chain of command before that thing can ever be implemented. And by that time, a lot of times the problem's already escalated. And then
with pest control, you're already with pest control. If you push something push it down the road 7 days, it's over.
It's done.
Yeah.
It's out of control. There's nothing they can do for you at that point.
And so it's, I work with a company out in Oklahoma, Native Provisions, and they have a great team, and they've been able to scale. They have beautiful, beautiful organic greenhouses, soil beds in there. They're running all the humate fertilizers, the microbes, and then they even have a little added aspect is they have these fish tanks, because the greenhouses that used to be there were like a aquaponics type deal. So they have the added biology from the fish and a small amount of nutrient. We tested the water. I was like, yeah, you can use that in these systems. And so, they're creating, these kind of cool solutions, and they have the teamwork to be able to make these things function really well and get a really high quality product, and that's the biggest thing is, man, you got to have a good team.
Yeah. So, I mean, okay, so I have to do a shameless plug here. So I have to do, you mentioned an amazing product, right?
Yeah.
We're sitting in the Fohse headquarters, so I have to shout out Fohse, right?
Yep.
And then you mentioned an amazing team, so I would also have to shout out Fohse. I mean, one of the things that you mentioned as a consultant is they get a lot of the benefits that you offer, not just, your information, as it relates to nutrients and soil and fertilizing, but you also walk them through that process. And that's essentially what you get here with Fohse. You purchase one fixture, but you also get Mike Howard, who's our VP of cultivation. You know, he has our public relations as well, you know, but he walks you through and gives you all of the secrets that you need to have the successful grow.
Yeah.
You know, if anything's wrong once you make a purchase, there's someone here that can kind of help you figure out where you went wrong and the recovery plan that's needed. So I see a lot that parallels, you know, in what we both do.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right? There's a lot of LED companies out there on the market, and I was like, okay, who is the best? Who's
Right.
the best? Why do I think they're the best?
Right.
And
What were you looking for at the time when you were looking for LEDs? What was the transition?
I wanted a solid product.
Yeah.
One, the product had to be exactly as advertised. I didn't want anything that was going to be like, okay, this isn't what it's, you know. I didn't want to be disappointed.
Right.
You know, I didn't want cheap material. I didn't want, you know, just having that feeling of just like this, like, you know, this sucks. Because I've had those experiences.
Yes. How often does that happen as it relates to other competitors? And obviously this isn't to shit talk anyone, but we're just talking about the process and the experience of a fixture. How often does that happen?
I'll just say this. I haven't had a ton of great feedback for a lot of the other, you know, stuff that I've used.
Fair.
And so
Okay.
I really like the products because you don't even have to go, like we were talking about this earlier. I was talking about the F1V, right? Mm-hmm. And that 1,000-watt light, I never had to put that thing past 75, right? And even on my lights on, you know, I do a slow ramp up. I have it on for a little bit, you ramp it down. And I saw the structure of the Aries, like how like solid construction it is, the way that it was designed, you know, all those things I took into consideration. As a consultant, if I'm trying to dial things in and I take my PPF D meter and I'm looking and seeing, you know, what my meters are, how far that goes down, and then the consistency over the space. Yeah. That was one of the things why I liked that 1,000-watt, because even just at, like, you know, when I was running it between like 60 and 75%, no matter what it was at, I'd always have consistent readout through the whole space.
Through the whole space that light
And
covers.
so that's really important, especially if you're really meticulous about how many plants you have in there, how, you know, and you're really meticulous about your training, and, you know, because you want everything to be consistent.
'Cause you're building a column of light in a room.
Yeah.
It's like, how much can you pack into that column?
And then, you know, obviously the customer service, you know, and that's one of the things that I was like, okay, because I'm doing complete design build outs. I have a team that can do, you know, design that's going to based off of the program that I use. You know, they know how deep the beds I use. They know how much soil it's going to take. They know, you know, how much water, what the cost on, you know, the fertilizer is going to be for a run. All that stuff is already laid out. And so being able to have companies like yourselves to back us on when we say, hey, we want to outfit you guys, or we want to get you switched out,
right?
And this is how, you know, we want to go about doing it. You know, whether it's helping with you know, rebates through the power companies, if it's possible, you know, helping with the customer service
or the price match guarantee.
And not only
that.
that, but, you know, because I work with people all over the state, and I'm, you know, my goal is to make sure that they have a quality product that's consistent. When federal legislation rolls through, ideally I'd like to be able to pull from these places to have distribution to other underdeveloped markets, where you can say, hey, we have distribution in Hawaii, we have distribution in New Mexico, we have distribution on the East Coast, we have distribution out of Oklahoma, where these things can go. And if you have, you know, marketing all set up, and you have good branding, and you have customer service relationships with the farms that you work with, and you have the marketing, right, and you have the visibility, and you're doing the education stuff, like all of that works cohesively to build national brands. It's like you need all of that to build a national brand. you know, and to be the best, you have to implement the best types of techniques. You have to have the best team.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm looking at. I'm like, how do we achieve all of these goals? And it's, you know, I can't do anything myself. I keep telling people about like the legislation. It's all about strength and numbers. And it's the same things with the businesses and our associations with each other, right? Because collectively together, we're all, like, it might have a name behind it, like it might have a brand, Bokashi and this, but it's all about the people that
absolutely.
are behind it,
Within the
right?
network,
Because all of us are sitting here saying, how can we make this thing work? How can we make this better? What can we do to improve and make it so that we can make this more cost effective, so these people can be more profitable, so that way we can continue doing what we do? Because the whole goal is to be the best, but if the people that we work with are also the best, you know, we want them to be the best too, because their success is our success.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's funny. I said that early on. I said that early on, I think in like episode like 2, if I'm not mistaken, where I said that specific line, because I mean, it's a chain of events. Like if it starts at the top with you're using the best products all the way down to the fertilizer, all the way down to your fertigation, everything, fixtures all the way down, then you get better product. Then you get better product to the facilities, to the dispensaries. Then the dispensaries get better product out to the customers. The customers are happy, the patients are happy, and the medicine is doing what it's supposed to, you know, and it goes back to, you know, what we said, that self-awareness and being aware of what we're putting out into the earth. I mean, your company is called Earthworks. You know, I mean, it's one of those things where you're conscious about it, and that's a chain of events. So that's definitely important.
And there's a goal, you know, the big goal behind my company is to create carbon positive farming systems.
Yeah.
You know, I've started in cannabis because that's where I'm from. That's the community that I've always operated in. But ideally, I'd like to take the same concepts that are really easily transferable. People do it all the time. You see a lot of the people up in Northern California that do regenerative agriculture. You know, you can cultivate food as medicine and not have to you can use local inputs, right? And I just want to help be a bridge too, because when you talk about industrial agriculture, well, it's damaging our land. There has to be a catalyst to shift that, right? You can't just end industrial ag, because billions of people would starve, right? And so well, there is like that evil component associated with it that's like, oh, this is fucking up our waterways and our land. That's like it's destroying our existence essentially. At the same time, there's how do we implement something better? And that's what I think that the carbon fertilizer is going to be doing, you know, because you can create systems where you do green waste recycling. So instead of stripping the land bare, you do your crop covers and you do different types of farming techniques to where you build the organic matter up. You can use the types of carbon fertilizer even in types of land areas that aren't maybe the best or the most fertile, and farm there while you're implementing those practices, and still be able to get good quality yields for your produce, and then be able to transition into these techniques. And then green waste recycling, doing things like solid state fermentation on bio green waste to create bio-fertilizers. I mean, these things are all going to be implemented in the future anyway, because people are figuring out ways to reduce waste and the you know, the footprint that we're generating. So it's all, you know, it's all part of the process. It's all, you know, going to come together, and it's just one of the things that we're working on as we build this thing up. So
what can people expect from your partnership with Fohse? I mean, I know that you mentioned the few fixtures of ours that you use. What were those again? Would you mind shouting those out for me?
Yeah, I got the Aries, which I really liked.
Yeah.
I liked all of them. I loved the controller panel, really comprehensive. It was big. It was really nice. It was better than any other little crappy controllers. And then I also had the 1,000-watt. I think it was the F1V.
Yeah, F1V.
Yeah, F1V. That was actually my favorite because of the area that I had it over. It was perfect for that
space.
4x4 space over that area, and it was completely consistent. And again, I didn't have to ever turn the thing up.
You said you kept it at what, 75%? You said
I didn't ever go up to past 75%.
Okay, gotcha.
750 watts.
So I ramped it at max, because I'll switch it throughout the cycle.
Gotcha.
You know, like, and then sometimes I'll even bring it down if the plants are like Oh, I got to lift, if I have
Yeah.
to, because that's a benefit too, because that's what I wanted to see. Can I keep the same consistent PFD across the canopy without having to move the light?
Yeah.
If I turn the light down because the plant is growing
Up into the light.
into further closer to the light, what does that look like? And that was one of the benefits that I saw, was being able to use the meter to see, okay, well, I'm turning this down 5, 6, 7, 10%, and I'm still at the canopy, and I'm not losing, to keep my canopy PPFD consistent.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I say that a lot to people, is we give these light readings at 3 feet. So as a grower, interpret that as you've got now it kind of gives you a window to understand how, and that's at 100%. So that means you can tune the light down and bring the light bring the plants close to the light, and kind of play inside that window with the PPFD and still understand that you've got penetration.
Right.
I've never had with really any LED light, I've never had to run things like full blast, like especially from the get go. Like it's always usually like a ramp up, and then depending on the wattage of the light. But yeah, that I really like that one. That was my favorite out of the room. And what I do hope to see, though, because I think what we will see is the implementation of maybe some of these agronomic testing methods too, because that's something that if you guys have in your guys' pocket, where you guys are able to talk to your customers and say, hey, we want to set up a system, we need to be cost effective, how do we go about doing that? And then it gives you guys an outlet and an option to say, hey, we have a company that we work with that has comprehensive organic growing practices, SOPs built. They can help you with soil. They can help you with lighting schedules. They can help you with all that stuff.
Right.
And then it helps grow the businesses collectively, because that'll drive more business to you guys, because you guys will be able to offer a wider array with your lights. And then it also makes it so that way my business grows, because we're working together to introduce more people to cost-effective cultivation style
And accurate cultivation.
and products and really good and really excellent products.
Incredible trust cultivation, because I think the other thing that Ben said, our president, early on, was this podcast isn't to shit on a lot of people, but it's a space to dispel a lot of myths and a lot of mistruths to really improve the industry for people. Cultivators, obviously, you'll naturally benefit, growers will benefit, but the listeners and those who are everyday cannabis connoisseurs and partakers, they get a different level of education and a different level of understanding, that they may not have had, and they're hearing it directly from people like you. Evan, what do you see the correlation between, a company like Bokashi Earthworks and with Fohse and LED? How do you see the synergy of those continue to grow?
So to me, I look at what Brandon does, and like the marriage of the efficiency of his systems and the idea of what we're bringing to the table. We're bringing an idea of more efficient lighting, more efficient lighting and stronger, more powerful lighting. And so if you're going to stay alive in this industry looking forward, you have to become more efficient. And as this industry changes over the next 10 years and we go to this distribution model across the states, and distributors get involved with taking a lot of producers' product to the market, and that's going to be the way that it's going to be modeled in some states, producers have to save as much money as possible and cultivate as efficiently as possible. And so if you're able to offer the most efficient light, and you look at our Advocacy, and you look at the amount of light that we're putting off, and you look at some of those things, and you pair it with an efficient system like what Brandon's doing, or what John Bay's doing, and what Steve is doing, and you see these ideas of efficiency, the marriage of these ideas, and you see why they go together, and why these people growing that way start to see why they gravitate towards this product too. It's not a mistake why these people are coming and working with us.
Yeah, 150%.
Yeah.
And for those who want to learn a little bit more, to learn some case studies and to read about some case studies who use Fohse fixtures, you can go to Fohse.com, and it'll be the third tab at the top right under case studies. And if you click that, you'll see some from Legion of Bloom, you'll see The Grove, and you'll also see our extended family Loom up in Michigan with Mr. Kevin Coute. So if you get a moment and want to read about the Fohse benefits and some of those people who have actually done the work after transitioning to our fixtures, those are some of the case studies to read. But in the meantime, Brandon, it's been a pleasure having you, man. We appreciate you closing off the season. It's a wealth of knowledge that you have. You know, in these situations, consultants are super valuable because you guys don't just bring you bring your experience and those around you, but you also bring the network with you.
Yeah.
You know,
and that's
the importance.
That's a huge thing too in this industry and community.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I appreciate you guys having me on here. And for anybody who's not familiar with me, you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram account is rust, R-U-S-T, .brandon, B-R-A-N-D-O-N. And you can also go to Bokashi Earthworks. .com, and you can check out the microbes and the humate fertilizers and soil amendments and all that kind of good stuff.
Again, for those who want to follow him on Instagram, that is rust. Brandon. And then also, if you like to follow him online and to learn about the Bokashi Earthworks, you can go to www.bokashiearthworks.com. I will also make sure that link is in our description bio below. And just to recap earlier, again, if you want to be involved with the Oklahoma bills 818 and 819, you can go to orcaok.com. That link will also be in our description. But again, Brandon, it's been a pleasure. Evan, it's your first time kicking it with us, sitting in the spot. Thank you for making sure you sat in, and I hope to have you back.
Yeah, just let him do his thing, right?
Of course, right?
Yeah.
No, it's good to have you. It's always good. Guys, you will see a lot more Fohse blood coming on in season 2. We have a lot more people on the team who are super valuable, and I hope that you guys enjoyed getting to hear a little bit from Evan. There's more from where that came from. There'll be more from where Brandon came from. But in the meantime, we hope you enjoy it. Go to our YouTube, go to our Instagram, follow us. And in the meantime, we'll be back soon. Peace out.